Welcome back to another edition of Beyond Sunday Podcasts, the Parenting Podcast edition. And this is a wonderful day because we're going to finally get into the tease is over, folks. We're getting into some of the practicals. You've heard some of the practicals already, but we're going to get into more of those. Before we do that, I'd love to say welcome back to our awesome leader of this conversation, Dr. Tim Riley. How you doing, Dr. Tim?
I am well above average. Thank you.
Above average. Dr. Tim Riley is the author of a couple awesome books. How many books have you written?
Only two.
Two. What are they?
So the first is the one upon which this podcast is based.
Yep.
First the broccoli, then the ice cream. The new subtitle for the upcoming second edition is A Positive Parenting Approach to Teaching and Discipline. The previous version is A Parent's Guide to Deliberate Discipline, currently available on Amazon. The second, also available on Amazon, is a more adult-focused book called How to Live an Unstuck Life, Unwind Anxiety, Subdue Stress, and Quiet Your Busy Brain.
Wow. Excellent. And so we're in the process of discussing the new edition.
Yes.
And that'll be done when it gets done, folks. Get off our backs. But we're excited for that to get wrapped up. But if you want to read the old edition and then get the new one and glean even more, the new one will be on Amazon once that's complete as well.
Eventually.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very good. So go become unstuck and learn about parenting, and then you can learn about parenting some more. So we've laid this outrageous foundation that I've found so helpful for me. And if you haven't tuned into any of these parenting podcasts before, go back and listen to the first 6 and then come back to this one, because now we are into positive discipline, and we're on step 1. Here we go. Dr. Tim.
Okay. So just to reiterate what we talked about at the end of last session, we're always guided by some fundamental principles. So we'll probably mention this several times again before we're done. Always, always, always the goal of discipline is to teach positive, appropriate, useful, productive behaviors, the kind that will help our children succeed in their own lives long after they're out of our house. So we're not training behaviors to make our own lives easier. We're training behaviors to make their lives better. Second is discipline is not an event. It's a process. It's a series of events, right? So most positive behavior change happens over time, not overnight. So we focus on getting what we can out of an individual disciplinary interaction. We teach today's behavior today, and then we go on to the next one, right? We don't have any expectations that there are these monumental changes in behavior from one day to the next.
So change happens over time, but the difference really happens in every little moment.
Yeah.
It builds.
And with kids, it's not a linear process. It's not like, learning math or something like that, that you learn a behavior and then you've got that behavior. And the way I say this is sometimes just when you think a behavioral skill has soaked in and they've really got it, then their brain springs a leak and they've got nothing the next day. So learning how to not be frustrated because of the fact that your children are children is one of the important features of approaching the task of parenting.
Wow. So less like trustable building blocks that you can step on over and over again, and more quicksand that you happen to not die in.
Sure.
That will not be included in the revision of the new book. So step 1, here we go.
Yeah. So we're going to back up just for a second here.
All right.
Very early on in the process, we talked about acting like an adult and the grown-up job description and all of that. And so we focused so much on here's what we're doing for kids, here's what we're doing for kids, and this is why we're doing it, and we're teaching behaviors to make kids' lives better and all of that. And that's right and correct from my perspective. But you're only going to do that well if you're in a position to do that, right? If your own life consists entirely of parenting, or even the dominant focuses on parenting, you're not going to do it as well as you otherwise might. So, I mean, the test for me is if 90% of your clothes have a jelly stain on them somewhere, that most of your calories come from eating crusts and leftovers off your kids' plates, and the most stimulating intellectual challenge you've had in the last week is to try to figure out what that stuff growing under your kid's bed might be, you need to make some changes. You can't help your kids if you deplete yourself entirely in that process. And so, I mean, I know this is kind of an old saying, but in the version of it I rely on came from the book, The Last Lecture. And it goes like this.
The Last Lecture.
Really good book if you've not read it. The best piece of parenting advice I've ever heard is from flight attendants. If things get really rough, grab your own oxygen mask first. Right? So when things get shaky, you got to make sure that you've got enough strength and that you are devoting time and energy to keeping your own resources up if you're going to do that job well. So there's no benefit to being a martyr as a parent. And some parents I know feel selfish if they take time or devote resources to their own mental and physical health, but it's really necessary. And an important part of thinking about that is it's demonstrably true, based on research, stress is contagious. And so if your life is nothing but stress-filled and overwhelmed all the time, then that's going to flow through to your kids. So whatever that means in terms of you finding some time to nurture yourself and to interact with other human beings who are taller than 4'2", that needs to be done. And it's okay, not only okay to do that, but it's necessary to do that.
So what you're saying is that step one of positive discipline for our kids is to get away from our kids.
Yeah, to take care of yourself.
To take care. Wow, this is an unexpected turn, people. Color me surprised. So we need to get away, be with other adults, get healthy. Maybe that's working out. Maybe that's like just being laughing and going out and
going to breakfast and having the loaded hash browns.
Oh my goodness! If you haven't tried them, try them. You'll feel like you're loaded yourself, ready to explode. So that is, I'm surprised to hear this, but really you can't give from something you don't have, is what you're saying.
Precisely.
Great.
Well, maybe as important is, too much attention, too much insulation, makes your kids dependent. And obviously they are dependent on you to a certain extent, but you want to move them toward independence. And so if your entire life revolves around them, then they will expect that will continue to be the case and not adjust well when other adults in their life, like coaches and teachers and stuff, don't see things that way. Mm-hmm. And at some point, they're going to be obligated to be independent, and you want them to be prepared for that.
Now, this can look very different for different people. I mean, I think about like the difference between married or single parents. Like this can look very different. So for me and my wife, it's us actually going on a date, actually getting away, those type of things. Can you talk to us a bit, like what does this look like? Is this as important for single parents?
So obviously single parenthood is a significant and probably still growing portion of our population. And so this is it's a big deal. And clearly it's harder. It's hard. I mean, it's hard for two parents, but it's harder still for single parents to be able to find something that, allows them to reload their energy instead of just expending energy on I'm working, I'm keeping up the household, and oh, by the way, I'm trying to discipline and motivate the kids. And at the end of the day, I got, more day left than energy and more month than money, at the end. So it's hard to do, but still important. And maybe something that helps to frame up the importance of that is to keep in mind that at least for your kids, you're the most important person in the world. And that's a really big title, and you should give yourself the respect that title deserves.
Right.
And so even if it's nothing more than, reading some book other than something on parenting, reading something for pure enjoyment or binge watching some stupid show or spending some time outside with an iced tea or whatever it is, just reminding yourself it's not only okay, it's necessary for me to continue to nurture my own interests. Join a book club, go to a church, get in an online class, something.
Wow, I love this. And so parents out there, this is like freedom for you. So say when you were a young adult and before you had kids or in your college or high school years and you love to read fiction and you haven't read fiction in 15 years because your kid won't stop screaming. And so you're just trying to help yourself figure that out. And you've read every parenting book you can find. I mean, we've got one. It's so funny. We've got one on our dresser in our rooms called The Explosive Child. And my kids
That's
now
right next to first the broccoli, then the
yes,
okay,
yes. And my kids now can read, and so we're. My wife was out of town. We're playing in the bedroom, and they both, my 9-year-old and 7-year-old, start laughing. And I'm like, what is so funny? They can't stop their laughing. They said, what is that book? The Explosive Child. And I just went along with it. It's all about this kid who just explodes, like he's just full of dynamite. And they thought that was the funniest thing ever. But I know that we have gotten ourselves caught up in this, like when we have free time, we should learn how to parent better because this is hard. And what you're saying is, no, like don't stop doing that. Listen to this podcast, but also read that fiction book. Refill yourself so you have energy to give.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So
put your own oxygen mask on first.
Get that oxygen mask on first. What does it look like for that single parent then getting out when they're ready to start dating again?
Yeah. So, that's for many parents who are single parents. I mean, part of that process of reintegrating or integrating with the adult world is I want to get back to dating or, some kind of socializing with the opposite sex. And those are important moments and need to be considered carefully, in my opinion. The impulse always is to act on, I'm interested in somebody here. They're really nice. I really like them. My kids are sure to really like them. So I'm going to introduce them to my kids right away. And that's almost always a mistake. If kids have lost a parent by separation or divorce or death, they're already vulnerable. And then, you introduce somebody new to them before they're ready for that. And results are predictable in one of a handful of different directions. I mean, one is potentially that they latch on to that person because it feels like they're filling a space that's been missing for them with the absent parent, and they get too attached too soon. And if that relationship happens to not work out, then it's devastating for the kid who now absorbs a second loss in a pretty short amount of time. Another example is that they resent that new person and potentially their remaining parent for trying to take the place of the now absent parent. And so again, you set the stage for a bad relationship going forward if that relationship happens to work out. And now you're starting off on kind of the wrong foot because they're viewing that person in a negative way. Sometimes kids do. You'll forgive the phrase here. What I refer to as peeing in the corners, which is they feel like that person is intruding on their territory, and so they're sort of marking the space. And you get kids who will act up in a big way and try to assert themselves and really push back against that new person coming in. So that process just needs to be managed, just be intentional about doing that if you find yourself in that situation. Generally speaking, waiting longer is better.
And when you say waiting longer, it's not in dating or hanging out with people of the opposite sex. It's waiting to introduce those folks to your kids.
Yeah. On those occasions when you can interact with that other person, you're developing your own relationship. You're making sure that, this is a person that probably my kids are going to get along with. Okay. But that doesn't mean you bring them home right away. I mean, the rule of thumb, and this is kind of hard to hear, is a year.
Wow.
Before you bring somebody else new into contact with your kids. And when you do that not in your home, but you do that in public places. So you're interacting and preferably public places where there's something enjoyable for the kids to do. And now you're creating positive associations between this new person and your kids. And then you gradually bring them into, kind of they're going to stop over and visit. And you know this person, you've been, 40 places with them already.
Yeah. Thank you for getting into that. That's feels heavy and serious, but it's important for us to learn about. So,
okay, yeah, it's a little bit of a sidebar here, but
Yeah.
just to kind of set us up for going forward.
So, step 1, act like a grown-up and fill yourself up so that you have something to give from. Kids are a reflection of our stress. And so if we're all stressed out, they're going to feed off that and they're going to start acting like that. So don't be surprised if they see you stressed out about everything, that they start acting in that same way, anxious, irritable, whatever it is. And then moving on, you talk about in your book about building a safe harbor.
Yeah. So not only is stress contagious, but calm is contagious, right? So imagine yourself out on the ocean. I was just on the ocean on this little fishing thing a couple of weeks ago, and the waves are rolling and the storm, the mother of all storms has rolled in, and there's lightning and waves and rain and all of that kind of. The only thing you want to do in that moment is get to somewhere safe.
Oh, man, it sounded like you're in Moby Dick.
Yeah, it was kind of like that.
Oh, my goodness. You're riding a whale.
Yeah, I was looking for fish that never appeared, but that's another story.
Sorry about that.
So, a sailor in that condition just wants to get to a safe harbor, just a place where things are calm and settled and predictable, and they can set their anchor and just be okay for a time. And that's really, generally speaking, the kind of environment you want to create in your home, where things are safe and secure and predictable, where parents act in reliable ways, where there are schedules and routines. A kid kind of knows what to expect from one day to the next.
So, okay, one of the things that we did recently in our home, we haven't been great at filling the kids in on our schedules. And honestly, as they were young, they really couldn't keep up either way.
Right.
But now that we have a 7 and 9-year-old, and they're like, when do I go on that play date? I know it's coming up, but when is it? So we've done something different. And for us, we've just put up a big planner. The way we did this, and maybe you could use this idea, there's actually frames called snap frames, where the edges of the frames come up. And so you can get big paper planners and you can write everything in, and you can substitute a new month rather than getting the tear off ones that kids might accidentally tear off and now your month is gone or whatever. So we've put that up on our wall and we fill in our calendar. And so our kids can now see what's going on. But after reading this section of your book, my thought is maybe I should also start to put in some routines in that calendar that give them a little bit of safety, even if it's Taco Tuesday.
Right. So I mean, if you think about, I mean, at a household level, at a parenting level, what are the characteristics of a safe harbor, right? This is a place I can go, just let down my guard, be myself. I know what to expect. I don't get surprised by a lot of things all the time. So, kids in a safe harbor home know they're always going to be loved and accepted no matter what. They know that their parents are going to be predictable and reasonable and consistent in the way they react to them. They don't need to worry about rejection or harm, and that things will be calm and settled inside, even when life outside is not. Especially when life outside is not, that's a place that they can go back to and know that they have the opportunity to rest and recover before they re-engage again. If you don't provide that, your kids will find it. If they don't find it in your home, they will find it somewhere else. They'll find somewhere else where they feel accepted, where they feel like they're not overwhelmed with stress or challenges or whatever. They will find someone else with whom to find that. We all seek that place of safety and security, and if you don't create it for them, they'll keep looking for it, and they'll find it somewhere else.
Now, I've often heard people say, like, and we've seen this with our own kids, is they do well in school. The teachers very rarely have negative things to say about them, and then they come home and it's like craziness.
Yeah.
And we're doing our best to make it a safe harbor. But I've heard people say, well, that's healthy. It's healthy if they let loose at home. Is that accurate, or is that just something people have said to make us feel better?
No, I think it's okay for them to let loose at home. I mean, and probably an indication that they trust you, right? What is important in that is how do you react to them letting loose at home? And by the way, it's far more likely, almost to the point of non-existent the other way, for kids to misbehave at home and not at school, rather than to do well at home and misbehave at school. That's rarely the case. But so what are the things about school? School has rules and routines, clearly stated expectations, clear consequences for what happens if you don't, some positive peer pressure, all of those kinds of things. And so kids will tend to fall in line with those, most kids. So you want to replicate some of that at home. But if they're going to act out, you want them to test things at home so you get a chance to correct and turn those behaviors in a positive direction. So, and maybe what this speaks to is that the idea of a safe harbor is that's a place where you can set down the anchor and settle in for a while, but that's not what ships are built for. Ships are built to sail.
Right.
So we have that established safe harbor thing, but then the idea is, okay, now take that and get back out. Go use those skills elsewhere.
So in order to create the safe harbor, you talk about like settling the waters rather than stirring them up.
Right.
So how can we do that?
So it's cultivating calm is what I would suggest. So first, it goes back to you making sure that you're meeting your own needs. You're able to maintain some calm. You've got your own sort of ability to manage your emotions under control, that you behave reasonably, rationally, all of that. That's another 10 podcasts. So we'll skip that part and assume you've got that under control. But by and large, uncertainty is unsettling, right? It is for adults. It is for kids. So what we want to do is create certainty, create routines, create structure, have a kid know that I can kind of count on how things are going to look in my house. I can count on how my parents are going to respond because it's the way they responded the last time and the time before that and the time before that.
Could I dare say that if a parent is struggling staying calm, or if they are becoming anxious or stressed out or angry, could your Unstuck book be helpful?
Sure. For
Great.
Parents, yeah.
So there's all kinds of resources, parents, because there's a lot of us in those waters. So this is an opportunity, like sometimes read your fiction, but then also read some of those, get some more tools in your toolbox so that you can help settle the waters rather than stir them up, because stress, like we said earlier, is contagious.
Yeah. But so is calm. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you go about doing it by building structures that impose some routine on your life. And we'll talk about three particular areas here. One is schedules, which is when things happen. Routines, which is or procedures maybe, which is how things happen. And then traditions, which is kind of the longer term version of structure. What you want is for kids to have things to look forward to in a positive way, and then to have those things actually happen.
Okay. So let's, in creating a safe structure, this uncertainty, if we have uncertainty in our schedules, our procedures, our traditions, that can be pretty unsettling for kids.
Yeah, but I mean, think about things that happen in your life where something happens.
Yeah.
Your car won't start, or you get a surprise letter from the IRS, or
Tim,
something.
I told you those things in confidence.
Yeah, sorry. Could we block that part out? That's it's unsettling, right?
Yes.
Or you have an illness and all your routines break down, everything that you've structured in. Absolutely the same thing for kids. We all have to deal with those things, but what you want is to be able to deal with them and then come back to a place where you can settle again and regain.
So don't neglect them, deal with them.
Yeah.
And then return.
But then,
to health.
recover and set sail again.
Okay. So uncertainty is settling. Repetition is powerful. You give some examples: driving a car, playing an instrument.
Yeah, kind of complicated behaviors, right, that seem really difficult at the time.
Yes.
I mean, think about all the stuff that really happens when you drive a car. You're looking in the mirrors, you got all these pedals and gauges and all these things you look at, and the first 2 or 3 times you did it, or first 100 times you did it, it was like, yeah, I don't, and now you don't think about any of it.
Right. And every time there's a new snowfall.
Yeah, that's mostly dodging other people. But the fact is, these really complicated behaviors get to be pretty simple and pretty automatic if you do them well at each stage of the process. If you learn each step well and practice it, then you do it without thinking. It becomes memory. Or playing a musical instrument. I play a couple of instruments, and it was awful. To begin with, it's still, moderately awful, but better. But it's painful doing that. And now I don't think about what my fingers are doing or what my hands are doing. It's automated because I learned each one of those component steps well. And so we want to teach practical skills at that level, but also the general process of put some effort into foundational work, do small things well, and big things will tend to take care of themselves.
Now, what if you have a kid who doesn't want to do the small things well? I mean, I think about my son loves athletics, and I'm like, bro, if once you learn how to dribble and make a layup, like you're going to be unstoppable because you're fast, athletic, whatever. And he's like, oh, I just want to shoot.
Yeah.
I just want to make deep shots. Like how to help a kid realize that the repetition matters.
You don't have to have them necessarily realize that the repetition matters. You just have to get them to do the repetition.
Well, how do I do that?
The act is the act, the same way you do anything else, right? So this is an example of what we talked about, I think last time, was, is you having the long-term analog parent view, you looking into the future and saying, it's going to be so much better for you if you do this. But he doesn't care about that because that's not now. What's rewarding right now is to shoot a basket, make a basket.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is, of course, I want you to shoot a basket and make a basket, and you're going to get the opportunity to do that right after you give me 5 minutes of dribbling.
Right
after you get
and then
the dribbling,
cheer on,
the dribbling is
reward.
Broccoli, the shooting is ice cream.
Right. And what does that look like to encourage and cheer on each moment of that dribbling?
And you reinforce that, but don't expect him to get that connection.
Yeah.
He's not old enough. He doesn't see that far ahead. It's not now.
Well, there you go. So schedules, procedures, traditions. Let's hit schedules first.
So schedules is the, when we do things. And your home doesn't need to operate like a boot camp, but routine should be, routine.
Wow, that was brilliant. Write it down, folks. Routines should be routine.
So for older kids, it's generally not that difficult. You have a calendar in the house somewhere. The kids are referring to it, whatever.
Taco Tuesday.
For younger kids who don't really have a good grasp on time or dates or whatever, it will tend to be more, what is the order of things? Okay, we've all got on our pajamas. Now we're going to brush our teeth. And after that, we'll read a story, say our prayers, and go to bed. right? So you're orienting them to time, but that's giving a structure to things. And then you try to repeat those schedules on a regular basis. And in the same way, routines of driving a car or playing an instrument get to be just habitual. They stop thinking about them and then just doing them. And you can train bigger chunks of behavior.
Right. You can learn how to spin that car in a, what do they call that? A donut. You can do donuts in the parking lot now.
Sure.
Maybe not. Do you do donuts in the parking lot?
Not anymore.
Oh, he did, folks. Even
So
Dr.
keep in
Tim
mind,
Riley.
I grew up with cars with rear-wheel drive, which are much better equipped for donuts.
The
than
golden
front-wheel
age
drive
of cars. So you mentioned time together is also part of the schedule.
Yeah. So, people will talk about, quality time with your kids, whatever. And sure, you want to make quality time where you can, but there's also no substitute for quantity of time.
Yeah.
Spending time with your kids. And a lot of the households I know that are filled with younger kids or even, somewhat older kids, you're 5, 7, 9, you start to have outside activities, all of those, they get busy.
Right.
A lot of your meals come, through a window in a paper bag. And you're going to things together, but you're not necessarily doing things together. And so the old saying is the most valuable gift you can give to someone is your time, because it's the one thing nobody can get more of. And for a lot of families I know, if it doesn't get scheduled, it ain't happening. So that means, Taco Tuesday or game night, or, we'd always do movie night on Sundays or whatever it is. But those things get scheduled. It's not, oh, we might be doing this. Or if, if everything works out, we're going to do this. Those things become priorities. You find time to do things with your children, not just schedule things for your children. And in essence, what you're saying to them is, hey, you're valuable because I'm willing to spend this resource that I have a limited amount of with you, nobody else outside of our family.
Yeah, and I find this also when we schedule time together, it's kind of like when I was a teacher. If I routinely communicate with my parents in the good and the bad, if I sent out emails saying, here's what we did in class and it was great, and Max, Sam, and Sarah worked on this project and we saw . If I give more of those positives, then when the negative hits, they're like, oh, well, but the teacher's for me. And the more quality time I have with my kids, there's also instruction and learning and as well as fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're teaching the ideas about values, but it also gives you a chance to express important ideas outside of disciplinary kinds of settings, right? You don't want all of your teaching to be built around discipline, so you get to talk about those things. Some of the topics that come up during the time that you're playing the card game or board game or whatever you're doing, or themes that come up when you're doing movie night or whatever, you get to express your values in ways that they will pay attention to.
Yeah. So put it on the calendar, folks. Mark your calendar for those times together. How about times apart?
Okay. So time together is really important, but you also don't want to give your kids the idea that they're at the center of the universe. They're not. And the sooner they get that idea, the better for everybody involved. If they think that you're going to devote all of your time or the majority of your time to them, then their expectation will be that that's the treatment they get from other adults, and it won't be. So very early on, you want to start training kids to learn how to take care of some of their own interests, how to keep themselves occupied and entertained. Even kids as young as a couple of years old can start to spend a few minutes on their own and should. And then you give them an opportunity to develop self-regulating skills, self-entertainment, all of that. And when that happens, you gradually extend the amount of time. And it's best always, if you're leaving kids on their own for a while, if you go check on them rather than waiting for them to come check on you.
Okay.
If they're coming to check on you, most likely that's going to be motivated by a little bit of anxiety or uncertainty. Is dad still there? I want to go, right? And if you check on them, then you're just reminding them, yeah, I'm still here. I'm still present. I'm still taking care of you. But also you have the opportunity to potentially, train them that dad could be looking in at me at any moment. And
Yes.
I want to be careful about
Yes.
what I'm doing here.
Right. Yeah. So my mom sees me even when we have time apart, but it's important for them to have that time apart and become independent. If the parent's always hovering and driving that, then it's reinforcing the kid is the center of the universe, which is not going to be true in the classroom. It's not going to be true in their employment. So once again, parents, you're looking down the road, but that's not how you're communicating to your kid. You're communicating through your actions now.
Yeah. Yeah. And if the kid comes and interrupts you for no reason that it's like, hey, you're bothering me, go play. And you get them used to the idea that, parents have, lives here as well. And you're still exerting some sort of more generalized control or supervision over that process, right? If a kid's hurt or in need or something, obviously you respond to them, but you want them to begin to learn exactly as you suggested, that life doesn't revolve around you.
So positive discipline with our schedules now and creating a safe harbor with our schedules. How about with our procedures?
Okay, so sort of second or to the extent that schedules are the when things happen, procedures are how things happen, right? And the more routine you are in just like think about how much of your life is consumed with just mundane junk.
Yeah, most of it.
Yeah, right. So it's like I'm putting gas in the car, I'm buying groceries, I'm cooking meals, and people say different versions of this, but like 90% of success in life is just showing up.
Yeah.
Right? Just be there, do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And the better you are at doing that, by the way, the more actual free time you have at some point, the less surprised you are by other events. So having regular ways to do things, putting your car keys and your billfold in the same place. When we came in today, I had a jacket on. I took the keys out of my pant pocket and put them in my jacket pocket. I do that every single time I go somewhere because then I won't forget my jacket. I can't leave without my car keys, and if they're in my jacket pocket, I do it. So I have a routine to do that. When I get home, I will take my keys out of the pocket and put them on a hook. It took me about 10 years to learn how to do this, but I never waste time looking for my keys or my billfold because they go in the same place all the time.
There you go. Example of this, there's a prophetic show, a comedy called New Girl. Let me explain how it was prophetic. There was an episode where they called it the Biden effect, the Joe Biden effect. And they're like, what does that mean? So this girl was trying to win the man, and they said, just do the Joe Biden effect. And she's like, what does that mean? And they said, just be there. Just be there. Like when he's going to get a drink, be there. When he's going to get food, be there. And this was before Joe Biden was president. And so it was like, it was humorous
about something completely different.
It was humorous at the time. And whatever your thoughts are on Joe Biden, it's like, well, he's been there and he's lasted for a long time and he's all the way to presidency. And so there's like, as that is humorous, but there is still that value of like, practicing those proper techniques over time will create successful results.
Yeah. And the idea is to develop habits, right? So if it's like when you come in, you put your book bag here, you get out your stuff, you put your shoes there, you do, right? You're transitioning into this new environment. I don't want to ask you tomorrow morning where your book bag might be. We already know. And you start with those sort of incremental things in the same way as you started the steps of driving a car or playing an instrument. Pretty soon you've got those. And in the context of parenting, what this means is eventually you get to bigger procedures like how to behave in public, how to disagree appropriately, how to assert yourself, how to accept no for an answer, right? Those more complex social skills are built on the idea that we do foundational skills. If you start teaching your kid to just put their dirty dish in the sink before, after they leave the table, then, the next step is rinse it off and put it in the dishwasher. And then, I've got little grandkids and they don't even think about it at my house. They get it, can I be excused? Yes. They rinse off their sink, they put it in their dish and put it in the sink.
And this creates even more opportunities to also praise and encourage that kid.
Yep. And it's like, hey, thanks.
Yep. Thanks for doing that. Way to go.
Yep. So I guess the thing that this raises to me is everybody at one point or another has heard the saying, practice makes perfect. It's a lie.
Oh, hot take. Practice makes perfect is a lie.
Practice makes whatever you practice.
Oh.
Right? If you practice being disorganized and chaotic, you will be disorganized and chaotic.
If you practice being lazy, you'll be a slob for eternity.
Well, yeah.
The last lecture.
So you either invest the time at the beginning to develop structures and skills, and that pays off later on, or you continue to battle not having those things and you expend that energy over time. And there's always that sense of, I'm not quite sure about anything. I'm not quite sure about anything. And that tends to breed, if not full-blown anxiety, just kind of discomfort with how life operates. So when we're teaching skills to kids like those, we're teaching procedures and just thinking about, especially younger kids, how we're teaching those things. There's a term that we would use called chaining, which is, we connect behaviors. And I use the example of setting a table. So one way to approach that is the parent does everything but the last step, right? Everything is down. You put down the silverware. Here's where the knives and forks go. Here's where the spoons go. And when they've got that routine down, then it's like, okay, they do that step and the previous step. They put down the plates and the knives and forks and the spoons. Then they put down the placemats of the forks and the knives, right? So you're gradually adding more steps to that as the original steps become more automated. And then pretty soon you can just say, set the table, and they know what that is because all of the steps have been learned independently and now have gathered together into this bigger skill. So that's a practical example, but it's exactly the same thing that applies to how to behave in a restaurant, right? We do these few steps and we pause and remind you on the way in the door about what that means, what I'm going to expect from you in here. And then we gradually add more responsibility. And as they get a hold of that, then you can just say, okay, we're in public now. You know what that means. And it implies a certain range of behaviors.
Absolutely. Okay, so this really gives us opportunity to give that positive discipline in our everyday life and to encourage as we go, and more opportunities to encourage will reinforce to that child that doing the right thing is worth it. And chaining, and then pretty soon they're doing big things.
Yeah. You start small and build. I mean, so an additional advantage, as you pointed out earlier, is gives you lots of opportunities to pile on the praise.
Yeah.
Hey, great job. You did that really well. You've done great with that. Let's add this part in. And it's not just, like putting forks down or vacuuming or whatever. That's not what you're really training. You're training breaking a bigger task into smaller components. You're training how to cooperate with a group of people to do those kind of things. So there's lots of stuff being taught within those things, but also that sense of order, predictability, safe harbor, calm, security.
Excellent. So we've talked about schedules, procedures. Let's get into traditions.
Okay. So in my mind, traditions are those things that are kind of like schedules, but on a less frequent basis, right? I think of schedules as more like daily sorts of routine things that we do.
Okay.
So things like the big events like birthdays and weddings and all of those kind of things are obvious examples. But every week we go to church. That's just a thing we do. And on this particular holiday, this is what we do. We have a way of approaching that. We tend to maybe wear different clothes. We eat different foods. We do different things. But our focus is on the continuity of the family, right? This is what our family has done over time.
Right.
Every year, or even if it's only, every month, or even if it's traditionally Taco Tuesday, then that's a thing. That's important. This is what we do, and they don't think about it. And so that we talked earlier about, helping kids extend the timeline and how they think about the future. This plugs them into the continuity of the family. And then you start talking about bigger events where bigger units of the family, more extended family get together. That gives them a place in time and as a unit of the family, within the church, all of those kind of things that anchors them in a way to a bigger organization, a bigger part of life.
Right. So if you want your kid to value these things, get it on the schedule and then make a routine and make it a tradition. So for me, it's like I want my kids to have faith as a value. And so with that, regular church attendance matters to us as a family. And so if sports start to get scheduled on Sunday mornings, we're going to put church over those. And we're going to make those decisions so that they can become traditions. They can become regular on our schedule. But also, I think back to my childhood, and one of my favorite traditions, oddly enough, was after the last day of school. My mom would bring us to Godfather's Pizza. We have those here in Omaha. We had them in Green Bay growing up, too.
Originated in Omaha.
Yeah, and in Green Bay, there was a Godfather's that the middle section was like up a step, and it was so cool. I was like, can we eat in the middle section? And my mom would say yes. And we'd get to eat at Godfather's after the last day of school. And it's funny that I look back on that fondly because Godfather's is, some of you might be like, the best pizza ever. It's fine. It's good. It's not great, but in my memory bank, that's like a tradition that mattered.
Yeah. So I when I was a kid, my dad, for whatever reason, decided that we needed to have a particular kind of Christmas tree. And so we'd get a tree, and then he had this thing that hooked up to the vacuum cleaner somehow, and he mixed these things together and sprayed fake snow on the tree. They flocking the Christmas tree.
Watch your language, please.
And it smelled, and it was messy. Do it in the garage, and then drag it up the stairs, and it'd be, stuff would fall all over, and it was really messy and kind of a pain. And I miss it. Right? So it's because that was like, this is going to happen every year. And it seemed to me at the time unnecessarily effortful. But this is just like, this is the thing that we do. And this is a thing that our family does, and sort of place this within that context of time. So when we're talking about schedules and procedures, we're talking about sort of the narrative of a life.
Yes.
Day-to-day kind of stuff. Traditions are the punctuation of life, right? It's like, this is where we pause a little bit in this other kind of stuff. We just kind of recognize where we are, what's happened since the last time we did this tradition, and gets kids away from that kind of, what we talked about as digital thinking, that now, not now thinking,
right,
and puts them in a longer term, bigger, broader context.
So this could be weekly, this could be monthly, this could be holidays, could be annual, birthdays. But to help get that sense of place and continuity, it also can be in the ways that we dress, the food that we eat, the flocking of the trees, and I like that you said that your father flocked it, because otherwise it'd be, and careful with this one, a mother flocking tree, and you don't want that. Although mother would have done that great too. But how about this? Life isn't always so simple. Tragedies happen. Things are lost. Someone may pass. Families may split.
Yeah.
So now what?
So now all the more important that you have established those things, that you've established that safe harbor, right? Because now you're into the storms, and life happens, and you get dragged out of the safe harbor. And so I'm always particularly concerned about what happens in families that separate, or there's death, or there's whatever. And it's extraordinarily disruptive, obviously, when somebody important to you passes or leaves for whatever reason. And kids in that situation are inclined to fear more loss. Right? This has already happened to me. What if this parent leaves too? Is this parent going to leave me or die or whatever? And those are the places where being able to pull back in and be reassured by those things is really important. So, it's generally best if, when disruptive things happen, as quickly as possible, you get back to routine life. Because there's a lot of reassurance in that, right? Things have gotten rough, things have gotten stormy, but there's still safe harbor here. I'm still going to be able to back up and reestablish my life and live. Life goes forward.
Right. And so when you say get back to real life, it's not ignoring what's just gone on. You really have to face up to that, and it may be done in different ways, through counseling, obviously through open discussion, clear communication. Right. To care personally for the people around you, while also challenging directly the challenges going on. But don't take months off of school and work.
No. And if you come out of chaos into chaos, right, it's not going to be good. So all this time that you're investing in these things, it's not like again, I think I said this before, it's not like your home should run like a military camp or whatever. It's just like, have some sense of routine, some sense of order, do as much as you can with that, build what you can. There's much more reassurance in doing things than there is in kind of verbal responses to chaotic times.
So we had step 1 of positive discipline was to act like a grown-up. And step 2 was cultivate the calm, right? Was that? Oh, no, step 2 is build a safe harbor. Part of that is cultivating the calm. So when we come back for the next episode, we're going to talk about step 3, give people a little taste of what step 3 is going to be about, whet their appetite.
Next time we're going to talk about developing expectations. And most parents have expectations, but that doesn't always mean that they're clear or organized about their expectations. And more often still, it doesn't mean that they have communicated those expectations clearly to their kids. And when that's true, that sets up the stage for conflict.
Yeah, this is something I struggle with, is having routine. I'm not a very consistent person. And so I'm excited to learn more about how to set up and properly communicate expectations so that my kids can get on the same page with me. And
well, lucky for you, we're going to talk about that next time.
Goodness. Well, join us next time for another parenting podcast. Until then, thank you for jumping in and learning how to parent well with us. Dr. Tim, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure's mine.
And listening universe, we'll see you next time.